Marriage, they say, is about building something together. After 15 years with Delilah, I'd learned that some people are better at demolition than construction. My name is Isaac Farrow, and I run a small contracting business in the Boston suburbs. Nothing fancy. Kitchen renovations, bathroom remodels, the occasional deck, honest work that pays honest bills. At 39, I've got calloused hands, a straight back, and what my business partner Nolan calls an unfortunate habit of trusting people who don't deserve it. Delilah Farrow, my wife, real estate agent extraordinaire, and the woman currently texting someone at 11:30 on a Tuesday night while pretending to watch Netflix beside me. Work? I asked, nodding at her phone. Sophie, she said without looking up. You know how she gets about her listings. Sophie Martinez, Delilah's best friend since college, had never worked past 6 p.m. in her life. But I nodded anyway, because that's what you do when you've been married long enough to recognize the lies, but not long enough to stop caring about them. The phone buzzed again. This time, Delilah actually smiled at whatever she was reading. Must be some listing, I said. She finally looked at me, her green eyes bright with something I hadn't seen in months. Sophie's just being dramatic. You know how she is. I did know how Sophie was. Loud, gossipy, and completely incapable of keeping secrets, which made her an interesting choice for whatever Delilah was really doing at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. I'm heading to bed, I said, standing and stretching. Early morning tomorrow? The Henderson job starts at 7? Delilah murmured, already back to her phone. I paused at the bottom of the stairs. You coming up? In a few minutes, just finishing this conversation. That conversation lasted until well past midnight. I know because I lay there listening to the soft ping of notifications from downstairs, each one like a tiny hammer tapping against my chest. The next morning, Delilah was already gone when I woke up. No coffee made, no note. Just the lingering scent of her expensive perfume and a coffee mug in the sink with lipstick on the rim. Red lipstick. She'd been wearing pink the night before. Morning, sunshine, Nolan greeted me when I arrived at the Henderson house. My business partner was already unloading tools from his truck. His weathered face creased with the kind of grin that meant he'd been waiting to say something. What's eating you? I asked. Nothing eating me, but something sure as heck eating you. You look like you've been chewing glass. Nolan had been my partner for 8 years, my friend for longer than that. We'd started the business together after I got laid off from a bigger construction company, and he'd stuck with me through the lean years when we were eating ramen and praying for callbacks. Just tired, I said, hefting my toolbox from the truck. Uh-huh. This have anything to do with your missus and her late-night phone habits? I stopped walking. What do you mean? Saw her at Murphy's bar last Thursday around 9. She was with that friend of hers, the loud one, Sophie. They were having what looked like a real intense conversation with some guy in a fancy suit. Murphy's was a dive bar downtown, the kind of place where construction workers grabbed beers after work, and real estate agents definitely didn't conduct business meetings. Probably a client, I said, but the words tasted wrong coming out. Maybe, Nolan said, but clients don't usually buy drinks for real estate agents, and they definitely don't put their hands on their knees while they're talking. The hammer in my chest had turned into a sledgehammer. We worked in silence for the next hour, ripping out the Hendersons' outdated kitchen cabinets. There's something therapeutic about demolition when your mind is churning. Every swing of the hammer, every crack of splitting wood felt like a small release. My phone buzzed around 10 a.m. Text from Delilah. Working late tonight. Client dinner, don't wait up. I showed the message to Nolan. Client dinner, he read aloud. On a Wednesday. Real estate agents work weird hours, I said. Isaac. Nolan set down his hammer and looked at me directly. I've known you for 12 years. In all that time, I've never seen you lie to yourself. Don't start now. That evening, I sat in my living room with a beer and Delilah's laptop. She'd left it open on the kitchen counter, which was either careless or a test. Her email was password protected, but her browser history wasn't. Restaurant reviews for places we'd never been together, searches for reconnecting with old flames, and when first love comes back. A MapQuest route to an address I didn't recognize in downtown Boston. I wrote down the address. The next morning, I drove there before work. It was a high-end apartment complex called Harbor View Towers, the kind of place where parking costs more than most people's rent. I sat in my truck across the street, sipping coffee from a thermos and feeling like a private investigator in a bad movie. At 8:15, Delilah's silver BMW pulled into the parking garage. At 8:20, she emerged from the elevator wearing the red lipstick and a dress I'd never seen before. At 8:25, she was joined by a man in a tailored suit who kissed her cheek and put his hand on the small of her back as they walked toward the street. I recognized him immediately, even though it had been nearly 20 years since I'd seen him. Stephen Vance. Delilah's boyfriend from college, the one she'd dated for 3 years before we met. The one she'd described as my first real love during those early relationship conversations when you're still naive enough to think honesty builds trust instead of resentment. Stephen looked exactly like what he'd always been, privileged, polished, and completely convinced the world owed him whatever he wanted, including, apparently, my wife. I sat there for another 10 minutes, watching them through the window of an upscale coffee shop, her hand resting on his arm while they talked. She threw back her head and laughed at something he said, the same laugh she used to give me before we got comfortable enough to stop trying to impress each other. My phone rang. Nolan. Where are you? Henderson's asking questions. On my way, I said, starting the truck. Everything all right? Everything's perfect, I said. Just had to confirm something. That night, Delilah came home at 11:30 with takeout from the expensive Thai place downtown and stories about her client dinner that were so detailed they had to be rehearsed. How was your day? She asked, settling beside me on the couch with her pad thai. Productive, I said. Learned some interesting things about foundations. Oh? Yeah. Turns out when the foundation has cracks, you can't just paint over them and hope for the best. Eventually, the whole structure comes down. She looked at me strangely. Are you talking about the Henderson job? Among other things. We ate in silence, the television providing background noise for thoughts too loud to ignore. Delilah checked her phone 3 times during dinner, each time with that same little smile. I need to ask you something, I said finally. Her hand froze halfway to her mouth. What? Are you happy? The question seemed to surprise her. What kind of question is that? The kind married people should ask each other more often. She set down her fork and turned to face me fully. Isaac, where's this coming from? I'm just wondering if we're building something here, or if we're just going through the motions. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. But then her expression hardened into the professional smile she used with difficult clients. We're fine, she said. We're just comfortable. That's what happens in long marriages. Comfortable, I repeated. Yes, comfortable, stable. Isn't that what you want? What I wanted was for my wife to stop lying to me about client dinners and late-night work calls. What I wanted was to not recognize the name Stephen Vance when it popped up on her phone screen for half a second before she tilted it away from me. What I wanted was to stop feeling like a stranger in my own house. Sure, I said. Comfortable sounds great. That weekend, I did something I'd never done before. I went through Delilah's purse. I found the hotel receipt tucked behind her credit cards. The Fairmont Copley Plaza, last Tuesday night. Room for 2, charged to her personal card. The same night she'd claimed to be showing properties to out-of-town clients. I also found a receipt from Victoria's Secret. $87 for items I'd never seen her wear. I photographed both receipts and put everything back exactly where I'd found it. Monday morning, I called in a favor from my cousin Danny, who worked in IT for a security company. For $200 and a promise to renovate his bathroom at cost, he sold me a voice-activated recording device about the size of a quarter. This is some spy movie stuff, Danny said, handing me the device and a small instruction manual. You sure you want to go down this road? I'm sure I want to know what road I'm already on, I said. That evening, while Delilah was in the shower, I placed the device under her side of the bed, tucked behind the frame where it would be invisible, but close enough to pick up conversations. I felt like a criminal, but criminals don't usually bug their own bedrooms to catch their own wives planning their own betrayals. The first few days of recordings were mundane. Delilah talking to her mother about Ben's soccer schedule, complaining to Sophie about a difficult client, arguing with our insurance company about a claim. Normal wife sounds that made me feel guilty for recording them. Then, Thursday night, she took a call at 11 p.m. I can't keep doing this, her voice said through my headphones as I listened in my truck during lunch break the next day. Doing what? A man's voice. Stephen's voice. Lying to him, sneaking around. It's not fair to anyone. Since when do you care about fair? Stephen's laugh was the same arrogant chuckle I remembered from college. You're the one who called me, remember? You're the one who said you'd been thinking about us. I know, but nothing. He was my first, Del. That bond never breaks. You said it yourself. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. He's a good man, Delilah said quietly. He's boring, Stephen replied. When's the last time he surprised you? When's the last time he made you feel like you did when we were together? That's not the point. That's exactly the point. You're 35 years old. You want to spend the rest of your life watching him fix other people's houses and drink beer in front of the TV? There was a long pause. When Delilah spoke again, her voice was different, harder. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you stop pretending you're happy and start doing something about it. I'm suggesting you remember what it felt like to be with someone who actually appreciates you." "And what about Isaac?" "What about him? You think he's going to fight for you? You think he even notices what's happening right under his nose?" Another pause, longer this time. "He notices more than you think," Delilah said finally. "Then maybe it's time to stop caring what he notices." The call ended there, but I sat in my truck for another 20 minutes, listening to the recording over and over again. He was my first. That bond never breaks. I thought about bonds. In construction, bonds are what hold things together under stress, but every bond has a breaking point. Apply enough pressure in the right places, and even the strongest connection will snap. I thought about Stephen's question. "You think he's going to fight for you?" He was right about one thing. I wasn't going to fight for her. I was going to fight smarter than that. The thing about being underestimated is that it gives you room to maneuver. For 15 years, Delilah had seen me as predictable Isaac, the guy who fixed things, paid bills on time, and never caused drama. The reliable husband who was too boring to surprise anyone. She was about to learn that reliable and predictable aren't the same thing. I started with reconnaissance. Every good demolition job begins with understanding the structure you're taking down. Delilah's structure was built on image, social status, and financial security. She drove a leased BMW, carried designer handbags, and never missed her monthly spa appointments. Her real estate career was successful partly because she looked successful. Clients trusted her to understand their upscale aspirations because she embodied them. Stephen's structure was even more fragile. I spent my lunch breaks researching him online, and the internet was happy to tell me everything about Stephen Vance, founder and CEO of VanceCore Technologies, a startup that developed apps for property management companies. His LinkedIn profile was a masterpiece of corporate speak and humble bragging. His Instagram was full of pictures from expensive restaurants, weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, and his pride and joy. A silver Porsche 911 that he'd apparently owned for 3 years and photographed from every possible angle. The company website listed him as the visionary behind Revolutionary Property Management Solutions. But a deeper dive into business filings revealed that VanceCore was burning through investor money faster than it was generating revenue. Classic startup trajectory, big promises, bigger expenses, and a founder who'd convinced himself that confidence was the same as competence. I also discovered that Stephen was engaged. The announcement had run in the Boston Globe's society pages 6 months ago. His fiancée was Meredith Cole, a corporate attorney who specialized in mergers and acquisitions. Beautiful, accomplished, and according to her law firm's website, not someone who tolerated nonsense. This was interesting information. On Friday evening, I tested a theory. "How was your day?" I asked Delilah as she sorted through mail at the kitchen counter. "Busy. 3 showings and a closing that almost fell through at the last minute." "Sounds stressful. You should do something fun this weekend. Maybe call Sophie, go out for drinks." She looked up, surprised. "You don't mind?" "Why would I mind? You work hard. You deserve to blow off steam." That night, she made 3 phone calls. The first was to Sophie, arranging drinks for Saturday night. The second was to her mother, discussing Ben's upcoming birthday party. The third was to Stephen. "He practically pushed me out the door," she told him. "It's like he wants me gone." "Maybe he's got his own plans," Stephen suggested. "Isaac, his idea of exciting Saturday night plans is organizing his toolbox." "Well, his loss is my gain. Murphy's at 9? I'll be there." Saturday night, I was there too. I arrived at Murphy's at 8:30 and took a seat at the far end of the bar where I could watch the entrance without being easily spotted. The place was crowded enough to provide cover, dark enough to hide in, and loud enough that conversations had to happen at close range. Delilah arrived first, wearing jeans and a top I'd never seen before. She ordered a glass of wine and checked her phone twice while she waited. Stephen showed up 10 minutes later, and I watched my wife light up like Christmas morning. They found a corner booth, and I watched them fall into the easy intimacy of people who'd known each other's bodies before they'd learned to hide their thoughts. His hand on her wrist when he talked, her fingers tracing patterns on the table between them, the way she leaned forward when he spoke, like he was sharing state secrets instead of startup war stories. I couldn't hear their conversation from across the room, but I didn't need to. Body language was speaking loud enough. After an hour, I'd seen enough. I paid my tab and left, but not before walking past their booth on my way to the bathroom. Close enough to hear Stephen saying, "Told Meredith I was working late. She's been suspicious lately, asking too many questions." "Maybe we should be more careful," Delilah replied. Or maybe we should stop pretending this is something we can walk away from. I continued to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. The man staring back at me looked tired, but not defeated. Disappointed, but not surprised. Mostly, he looked like someone who was done being underestimated. Sunday morning, I made pancakes. Delilah wandered into the kitchen at 10:30, wearing my old college t-shirt and looking like someone who'd stayed out later than she'd intended. "You're up early," she said, accepting the plate I offered her. "Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about the business. Everything okay?" "Just planning ahead. Nolan and I have been talking about expansion, maybe taking on bigger jobs, commercial work." This was true. We'd been having those conversations for months, but I'd always been the cautious one, worried about overextending ourselves. "That sounds exciting," Delilah said, but she was already reaching for her phone. "It would mean some changes. More travel, longer hours. Better money, though." She was scrolling through messages, not really listening. "I might need to restructure some things, business accounts, insurance, that kind of thing. Make sure everything's organized properly." "That makes sense?" I doubted she'd remember this conversation in an hour, but it didn't matter. I wasn't really talking to her anyway. I was talking to my future self, the one who would need to explain why he'd spent Sunday afternoon moving money around and making phone calls to lawyers. Monday morning, I opened a new business account at a different bank. I transferred half of our joint savings, my half, into the new account, along with the business funds that had been sitting in our shared checking account for tax purposes. I also made an appointment with Tom Bradley, a divorce attorney Nolan had used during his messy split 3 years earlier. "I'm not ready to file anything yet," I told Tom during our consultation Tuesday afternoon. "I just want to understand my options." Tom was a practical man in his 50s who'd seen enough domestic drama to approach it like any other business problem. "How long have you been married?" 15 years. "Kids?" 2. Ben's 14, Zara's 12. "Any evidence of the affair?" I played him selected portions of the recorded phone calls. Tom listened without expression, taking notes on a legal pad. "This is good evidence, but Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state. Adultery doesn't affect property division much, though it can influence custody decisions if you can prove it's affecting the children. I don't want to hurt the kids." "Admirable, but you also don't want to get taken advantage of. Your wife's a real estate agent, right? She understands property values, financial planning. Don't assume she's not already thinking about how to protect herself." "What do you recommend?" "Document everything, financial records, communication, behavior patterns, and consider whether you want to confront her directly or let her make the next move." I thought about Stephen's arrogant voice, asking if I would fight for her. "I want to let her make the next move," I said, "but I want to control what moves are available to her." Tom smiled. "Now you're thinking like a lawyer." That evening, I started phase 2 of my reconnaissance. If Delilah was planning to leave me for Stephen, she'd need to believe that Stephen was a viable long-term option, which meant I needed to understand exactly how viable he actually was. I drove to Stephen's apartment building and spent an hour in the parking garage looking at his Porsche. Beautiful car, immaculately maintained, probably worth more than I made in 6 months. The kind of toy that screamed success to people who measured success by the price tags on their possessions. I also noticed that he parked in spot 247, which meant he lived in unit 247. The building directory confirmed it. S. Vance, 2G. Wednesday night, Delilah announced she was working late again. "Big client," she explained. "Out-of-town investors looking at multiple properties. Could be a huge commission if I land them." "That's great," I said. "I'll grab dinner with Nolan, talk about those expansion plans." I did have dinner with Nolan, but we spent most of it talking about Delilah. "You're being too calm about this," he said over his burger. "If it was my wife, I'd have confronted her by now." "And said what? I know you're having an affair. Please stop?" "It's a starting point. No, it's an ending point. The minute I confront her, she has to make a choice. And right now, she might choose him." Nolan frowned. "So what's your plan? Wait around until she leaves you?" My plan is to make sure that when she makes her choice, she understands exactly what she's choosing." After dinner, I drove back to Harborview Towers. Stephen's Porsche was in its usual spot, but there was a second car parked beside it. A black Mercedes with the license plate Cole Law. Meredith's car. I waited in the visitor parking area, curious about the timing. If Stephen was upstairs with his fiancée while my wife was somewhere else believing she was his priority, that was information worth having. At 9:30, I watched Meredith Cole walk out of the building toward her Mercedes. Even from a distance, she looked angry. She moved with the sharp, efficient stride of someone who just had a conversation she didn't enjoy. She sat in her car for several minutes before driving away, and I found myself wondering what she'd discovered, or suspected, or been told. Thursday morning, I made another appointment with Tom Bradley. "I want to understand something," I said. "If my wife leaves me for this other man, and then that relationship doesn't work out, can she come back and claim she was temporarily confused or emotionally compromised? Are you asking if she can undivorce you? I'm asking if there's a way to make sure that when she makes her choice, it's final." Tom leaned back in his chair. "Isaac, I have to ask, are you planning to sabotage this other relationship?" "I'm planning to let it sabotage itself, but I want to make sure I'm protected when it does." "Then you need to think about timing. If you file first, you control the narrative. If you wait for her to file, you're responding to her story instead of telling your own. But if I file first, she'll know I was planning this. And if you wait, she might be planning something too." That evening, I tested another theory. I suggested that Delilah and I should plan a weekend getaway. "Just the two of us," I said. "It's been too long since we did something romantic." She looked uncomfortable. "This weekend? Or next weekend? Whenever works for you." "I'm really busy with work right now. Maybe in a few weeks?" "Sure, no rush." But there was a rush, and we both knew it. She was stalling because she couldn't imagine being romantic with me while she was falling back in love with someone else. I was stalling because I wanted to see how far she'd go before she forced the issue herself. Friday night, she went out with Sophie again. This time, I didn't follow her to Murphy's. Instead, I drove to Stevens' building and waited. At 11:15, Delilah's BMW pulled into the parking garage. She didn't come home until Saturday morning. Saturday morning, Delilah walked through our front door at 7:30 a.m. carrying coffee and croissants from the expensive bakery downtown. Peace offerings disguised as thoughtful gestures. "You're up early," she said, finding me at the kitchen table with my own coffee and the newspaper. "Couldn't sleep," I replied without looking up. "How was girls' night?" "Long. We ended up talking until really late. I crashed at Sophie's rather than drive home." Sophie lived in a studio apartment barely big enough for one person, much less overnight guests. But I nodded, like this made perfect sense. "Brought you breakfast," she said, setting the bakery bag on the table. "Thanks. That's thoughtful." She hovered near the counter, and I could feel her watching me, waiting for questions that didn't come, preparing for accusations I didn't make. "Isaac? Yeah? Is everything okay between us?" I folded the newspaper and looked at her directly. She was still beautiful at 35, still the woman who'd caught my attention at a house party 17 years ago by arguing with someone about the structural integrity of the deck we were standing on. She'd been wrong about the engineering, but right about the confidence it took to voice an opinion in a room full of strangers. Now she looked like a stranger herself. "Why do you ask?" "You've seemed distant lately, distracted." "I've been thinking about the future," I said, "about what we're building here. And I think we want different things." Something flickered across her face, relief, maybe, that I was finally opening the door she'd been afraid to walk through herself. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I think you're ready for something I can't give you." "Isaac, I don't understand what you're—" "Excitement," I said. "Adventure. The feeling of being with someone who surprises you." She sat down across from me, her expression careful. "What makes you think that?" "Because I know you, and I know I'm not the same person you fell in love with." This was true, but not in the way she was hearing it. The person she'd fallen in love with had been naive enough to believe that honesty and reliability were enough to build a marriage on. The person sitting across from her now understood that some people needed drama more than they needed security. "You're a good man," she said quietly. But, she hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "But sometimes I wonder if we got married too young, if we settled for comfortable instead of waiting for extraordinary. And now you're wondering what extraordinary feels like." She nodded, looking relieved that I was saying the words she couldn't. "So what do we do about it?" I asked. "I don't know." "Well, we have some time to figure it out. I'm going to be traveling more for work anyway. Nolan and I landed that commercial contract I mentioned." This was a lie, but a useful one. "You did?" "Renovation project in Hartford. It'll mean being away 3 or 4 days a week for the next couple months, but the money's too good to pass up." That's great, Isaac. I'm proud of you." "Thanks. It'll give us both some space to think about what we want." That afternoon, I drove to Hartford and checked into a budget hotel. I took photos of the room, the view from the window, and the hotel restaurant. Then I drove home and uploaded the photos to a cloud storage account I could access from my phone. If Delilah wanted to believe I was traveling for work, I'd give her the evidence she needed to believe it. Sunday evening, I packed a bag and announced I was leaving for Hartford in the morning. "How long will you be gone?" she asked. "Back Thursday night, maybe Friday morning if the job runs long." She nodded, but I could see her mind working behind her eyes. 4 days of freedom. 4 days to explore what extraordinary felt like without worrying about her boring husband coming home unexpectedly. Monday morning, I kissed her goodbye and drove toward Hartford. I made it as far as a rest stop 20 miles outside Boston, where I turned around and came back. I spent the day at a library in a neighboring town, using their computers to research Stephen's business and Meredith's law firm. I also called Tom Bradley and scheduled another appointment. That evening, I checked into a different budget hotel, this one only 10 minutes from my house. Close enough to monitor the situation, far enough away to maintain the illusion of distance. At 9 p.m., I drove past my own house. Delilah's BMW was gone. At 9:15, I was parked across from Harbor View Towers, watching her car pull into the parking garage. Tuesday morning, I called in sick to my actual job and spent the day following Delilah's routine. She left Stephen's building at 7:30, went home to shower and change, then headed to her office. Normal Tuesday behavior, except for the part where she'd spent the night with her college boyfriend. That evening, I called her from my hotel room. "How's Hartford?" she asked. "Exhausting. This job's bigger than we thought." "How are things there?" "Quiet. I'm actually enjoying having the house to myself." "Good. You should enjoy it. Maybe invite Sophie over, have a girls' night in." "Maybe I will." But she didn't invite Sophie over. At 8 p.m., I watched her drive back to Stephen's building. Wednesday, I decided to get creative. I drove to VanceCore Technologies, which operated out of a converted warehouse in Cambridge. The building housed a dozen small companies, and the directory in the lobby listed VanceCore on the 3rd floor. I took the elevator up and walked past their office. Through the glass door, I could see Stephen at a desk, talking animatedly on the phone while gesturing at a computer screen. He looked like every tech entrepreneur who'd ever pitched a revolutionary idea that was really just a minor improvement on something that already existed. The office was smaller than I'd expected. 3 desks, a conference table, and a coffee station that looked like it hadn't been restocked in weeks. Either VanceCore was maintaining a deliberately lean operation, or they were running out of money faster than they were bringing it in. I took the stairs down to the 2nd floor, where a graphic design company had a more established-looking setup. I struck up a conversation with the receptionist about the building's other tenants. "Oh, VanceCore," she said when I mentioned them. "They're interesting. The CEO's a nice enough guy, but they've been having some drama lately." "Drama?" "His fiancée came by last week. Beautiful woman, but she looked furious. There was some shouting, something about trust and honesty. She left crying." "That's too bad." "Yee. And then yesterday, some guy in a suit came by asking questions about their lease. Looked like a lawyer or an accountant. The VanceCore people seemed pretty stressed about it." "Interesting." Stephen's personal life was falling apart at the same time his business was facing scrutiny. That suggested a man under pressure, which meant he was more likely to make poor decisions, like pursuing a married woman while his own engagement was crumbling. Wednesday evening, I called Delilah again. "How's the project going?" she asked. "Complicated. We found some structural issues that weren't in the original assessment. It's going to take longer than we thought." "How much longer?" "Hard to say. Maybe another week." "Another week?" She sounded disappointed, which was interesting. "Is that a problem?" "No, it's just, I miss you." "I miss you too." This was the first outright lie either of us had told during the conversation, and we both knew it. Thursday morning, I made a decision that would have surprised the old Isaac. I drove to Meredith Cole's law firm. The offices of Cole, Brennan, and Associates occupied 2 floors of a downtown high-rise. The reception area was all marble and mahogany, designed to intimidate clients into believing they were getting their money's worth. "I'd like to speak with Meredith Cole," I told the receptionist. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I have information she might find interesting. About Stephen Vance." The receptionist's expression shifted slightly. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "Personal matter. I think she'll want to hear what I have to say." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Meredith Cole's office, looking at a woman who was even more impressive in person than she'd been in her professional photos. Mid-30s, sharp suit, eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Farrow," she said, settling behind her desk. "My assistant said you wanted to discuss Stephen Vance." "I did. I thought you should know that your fiancé is having an affair with my wife." She didn't flinch, which told me she'd already suspected as much. "And you're telling me this because?" "Because I think we might be able to help each other." "How so?" I pulled out my phone and played her one of the recorded conversations between Delilah and Stephen, the one where he'd talked about leaving his boring fiancée for someone who understood him better. Meredith listened without expression, but I saw her hands tighten on her desk. When was this recorded? Last week? And you have more? Quite a bit more. She leaned back in her chair. What do you want, Mr. Farrow? I want my wife to understand the consequences of her choices, and I suspect you want your fiancé to understand his. Stephen and I aren't married yet. I can walk away cleanly. But you don't want to walk away cleanly. You want him to understand what he's losing. She smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. You're more perceptive than I expected. I'm a lot of things people don't expect. What did you have in mind? I think Stephen believes he's trading up, leaving a successful attorney for a real estate agent who makes him feel young and exciting. He probably thinks you'll fight for him, or wait for him, or be there when he gets tired of reliving his college glory days. And you want to prove him wrong. I want to prove that some bonds are stronger than others, and some break easier than people think. Meredith was quiet for a long moment, studying me with the kind of attention she probably reserved for hostile witnesses. You realize this could get messy, she said finally. It's already messy. I'm just trying to control the cleanup. What do you need from me? Time your exit for maximum impact, and maybe share some information about Stephen's business situation. I understand Vance Corp is having financial difficulties. Stephen's been burning through investor money for 2 years. The company's 3 months away from bankruptcy, but he hasn't told anyone. He's been using personal credit to keep the lights on. Does my wife know this? I doubt it. Stephen's very good at maintaining appearances. Not as good as he thinks. Meredith stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the city below. You know, Mr. Farrow, most men in your situation would be planning to fight for their wives. Most men in my situation don't understand that some fights are won by not fighting, and some bonds break easier when you apply pressure to the right stress points. Exactly. She turned back to me. I think we understand each other. I think we do. Give me your number. I'll be in touch when it's time to coordinate. That evening, I drove home to Boston and called Delilah from the road. Change of plans, I said. Job got postponed. I'm coming home tonight. Tonight? But I thought, client had a permit issue. We can't start the next phase until Monday. I should be home by 10. Oh, okay. I'll see you then. I arrived home at 10:15 to find Delilah in the living room, wearing pajamas and watching television like she'd been there all evening. But her hair was still damp from a recent shower, and she smelled like expensive soap instead of the drugstore brand we kept in our bathroom. How was Hartford? She asked, kissing my cheek. Educational, I said. I learned a lot about structural engineering. That's nice. How was your week? Quiet. I mostly just worked and stayed home. Good. Sometimes quiet is exactly what you need. That night, I lay in bed listening to Delilah breathe beside me, and I thought about bonds and breaking points and the difference between fighting for something and fighting smart. Tomorrow, I would start applying pressure to the right stress points. Tomorrow, I would find out exactly how unbreakable that first love bond really was. Friday morning, I woke up before dawn and did something I hadn't done in months. I made breakfast for the whole family. Pancakes, bacon, fresh coffee, and orange juice squeezed from actual oranges. What's the occasion? Ben asked, sliding into his chair at the kitchen table. At 14, he'd developed the teenager's natural suspicion of parental gestures that deviated from routine. Can't a father make breakfast for his family? You can, Zara said, stabbing her pancakes with more enthusiasm than her older brother. But you usually don't. Maybe I'm turning over a new leaf? Delilah appeared in the kitchen, wearing her robe and a confused expression. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, figured I'd do something productive. She poured herself coffee and sat down across from me. Everything okay? Everything's perfect. I've been thinking about what we talked about last weekend, about wanting different things. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Isaac, it's okay, I said, glancing at the kids and keeping my voice casual. I think you were right. We both need to figure out what we really want. What does that mean? It means I'm going to start traveling more for work. Give us both some space to think. Ben looked up from his phone. You're going away again? Just for work, buddy. Nothing permanent. How often? Zara asked. A few days a week, probably, but I'll be home on weekends. This was mostly true. I would be away from the house several days a week, but I wouldn't be in Hartford. I'd be much closer, watching and waiting and applying pressure where it would do the most good. After the kids left for school, Delilah cornered me in the kitchen. We need to talk about this, she said. About what? About you suddenly deciding to travel for work right after I said I was feeling restless. I thought you'd be happy. You said you wanted space to figure things out. I did, but what? You want space, but only on your terms. She looked frustrated, like someone trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I meant we should talk about our problems, not run away from them. I'm not running away. I'm giving you room to breathe. And what if I don't want room to breathe? Then you can tell me that. But right now, you seem like someone who needs to figure out what she wants without her boring husband watching over her shoulder. She flinched at the word boring, which told me I'd hit the right nerve. I never said you were boring. You didn't have to. That afternoon, I implemented phase 1 of my new strategy. I drove to the bank and transferred another chunk of money from our joint account into my separate business account. Not enough to trigger automatic notifications, but enough to limit Delilah's financial flexibility if she decided to make any sudden moves. I also stopped by our insurance agent's office and made some adjustments to our policies. Nothing dramatic. Just removed Delilah as the primary beneficiary on my life insurance and changed the emergency contact on my health insurance from her to Nolan. Small changes that would matter later. That evening, I announced I was leaving for Hartford again on Sunday. How long this time? Delilah asked. Probably through Thursday, maybe Friday. That's a long time. It's good money, and like you said, maybe we both need some time to think. Sunday morning, I packed my bag and kissed Delilah goodbye. This time, I drove all the way to Hartford and checked into the same budget hotel I'd photographed the week before. I took a few pictures of myself in the lobby and the restaurant, then drove back to Boston. By Sunday evening, I was installed in my surveillance hotel, close enough to monitor Delilah's movements, but far enough away to maintain my cover story. At 8 p.m., I watched her BMW pull into Stephen's parking garage. Monday morning, I called Tom Bradley. I need to accelerate our timeline, I told him. What's changed? My wife's getting more serious about her affair. I want to be ready to file the minute she forces the issue. Do you think she's planning to leave you? I think she's planning to have her cake and eat it too, but that's not going to be an option. What do you need from me? Draft the papers. Everything we discussed, custody, property division, the works. I want to be able to file within 24 hours when the time comes. That's aggressive. This whole situation is aggressive. Monday evening, I got a call from Meredith Cole. We need to meet, she said. When? Tonight. There's something you should know. We met at a coffee shop in Cambridge, far enough from both our neighborhoods to avoid accidental encounters with people we knew. Stephen asked me to postpone the wedding, Meredith said without preamble. When? This afternoon. He said he needed more time to focus on his business. But you know the real reason. The real reason is that he's convinced himself he's in love with your wife. And what did you tell him? I told him I needed time to think about it. But you're not actually thinking about it. I'm thinking about timing. If I break up with him now, he'll run straight to Delilah. If I wait until he's more invested in the fantasy, the crash will be harder. How invested is he? Meredith pulled out her phone and showed me a text message. He sent this an hour ago. The message read, I know this is hard, but I think we both know we're not right for each other. Delilah makes me remember who I used to be. Delilah makes him remember who he used to be, I repeated. That's poetic. That's delusional. The Stephen I know is ambitious, self-centered, and completely incapable of putting anyone else's needs before his own. Your wife is about to discover that nostalgia isn't the same as compatibility. Unless she's just as self-centered as he is. Is she? I thought about 15 years of marriage, of small compromises and shared responsibilities, and the gradual realization that we'd become strangers sharing a mortgage. She's not cruel, I said finally, but she's not selfless either. She wants to be the center of someone's world, and I stopped making her feel that way a long time ago. And Stephen makes her feel special. For now, but Stephen's broke, his business is failing, and he's about to lose his successful fiancée for a married woman with 2 kids and a mortgage. That's not going to feel special for very long. So we wait for reality to set in. We help reality along. Meredith smiled. What did you have in mind? How much does your law firm know about VanceCore's financial situation? We've been retained by one of their investors. The investor is concerned about their return on investment. Concerned enough to demand an audit. Concerned enough to demand transparency. Stephen's been very evasive about their burn rate and revenue projections. And if that investor decided to pull their funding? VanceCore would collapse within 60 days. Interesting. Isaac, I should point out that deliberately sabotaging someone's business could have legal consequences. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm just suggesting that investors have a right to accurate information about their investments. And if that information happens to become available at a strategically advantageous moment, then that's just good timing. Meredith was quiet for a moment, studying me with the same intensity she'd shown during our first meeting. "You're not what I expected," she said finally. "What did you expect?" "A victim. Someone looking for sympathy or revenge. I'm not looking for either. I'm looking for clarity." "Clarity?" "I want my wife to see Stephen exactly as he is. Not as she remembers him, not as she imagines he could be, but as he actually is right now. A middle-aged man with a failing business, a broken engagement, and no plan beyond reliving his college glory days. And then? And then she can make her choice based on reality instead of fantasy. You think she'll choose you? I think she'll realize she's been choosing poorly." Tuesday morning, I called Delilah from my hotel room. "How's Hartford?" she asked. "Frustrating. We keep running into problems that should have been caught in the initial assessment." "That sounds expensive." "It is, but we're committed now. How are things there?" "Fine, quiet." "Good. I like knowing you're safe at home." There was a pause. "Isaac?" "Yeah?" "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we'd met later in life, when we were more sure of who we were?" "Sometimes. Why?" "Just wondering if we would have made different choices." "Probably, but we can't remake the past. We can only decide what to do with the future." "What do you want to do with the future?" "I want to be happy, and I want you to be happy, even if that means different things than it used to." Another pause. "I love you, you know." "I know. I love you too." This was true, but it was also irrelevant. Love wasn't the problem. The problem was that we'd confused love with compatibility and compatibility with inevitability. Wednesday morning, I got another call from Meredith. "It's time," she said. "Time for what?" "I'm breaking up with Stephen today, and I'm going to make sure he understands exactly why." "What are you going to tell him?" "The truth. That I know about the affair, that I know about the business problems, and that I'm not interested in being anyone's safety net." He'll run straight to Delilah. "That's the idea. Let him make his grand romantic gesture while his world is falling apart. Let her see what she's really signing up for." "And the investor situation?" "My client will be requesting a full financial audit by Friday. Stephen will spend the rest of the week scrambling to explain why his company is 3 months away from bankruptcy." "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure that some people need to learn their lessons the hard way." That evening, I drove past Stephen's building and saw Meredith's Mercedes in the parking garage. I parked across the street and waited. An hour later, she emerged and drove away. Her posture was straight, her movements controlled. She looked like someone who'd just finished an unpleasant but necessary task. 15 minutes after that, Stephen came out of the building. He was on his phone, pacing back and forth in front of the entrance. Even from a distance, I could see the agitation in his body language. At 9:30, Delilah's BMW pulled into the garage. She was walking into a trap, but she didn't know it yet. She thought she was walking into a romantic reunion with her first love. She was about to discover that some bonds don't just break, they shatter. Thursday morning, I woke up in my surveillance hotel to 17 missed calls from Delilah. The calls had started at midnight and continued until 3 a.m., then picked up again at 7. I called her back. "Isaac, thank God," she said before I could speak. "I need to talk to you." "What's wrong?" Something happened. Can you come home?" "I'm in Hartford, remember? What kind of something?" There was a long pause, filled with the sound of her breathing and what might have been crying. "Delilah?" "I made a mistake," she said finally. "What kind of mistake?" "The kind that changes everything." I let the silence stretch, giving her room to fill it with explanations I already knew. "I've been seeing someone," she said. "Seeing someone?" Stephen Vance, from college." "Okay," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "How long?" "A few weeks, maybe a month." "And now?" "And now God, Isaac, he's lost his mind. He showed up at my office yesterday afternoon and made this huge scene about how we're meant to be together and how he's leaving his fiancée for me." "That sounds romantic." "It sounds insane. He was talking about us moving in together and starting over and how we never should have broken up in the first place." "And what did you tell him?" "I told him he was moving too fast, that I needed time to think." "And?" "And he said he'd already told his fiancée about us, that he'd burned his bridges and I needed to burn mine." "By leaving me?" "Yes." I was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Stephen had moved faster than I'd expected, which meant the pressure was working. "Isaac, are you there?" I'm here. I'm just trying to understand what you're telling me. I'm telling you that I screwed up, that I got caught up in some fantasy about the past, and I lost sight of what was real. And what's real? You are. Our family is. This life we built together. Even though it's boring? It's not boring. It's stable, reliable, safe. And Stephen isn't. Stephen is a mess. His business is failing, his fiancée left him, and he's talking like a teenager who thinks love conquers everything. Love doesn't conquer everything? Not when you're 35 years old with a mortgage and kids and responsibilities. This was exactly what I'd hoped she would realize, but hearing her say it didn't feel like victory. It felt like watching someone wake up from a dream they'd needed to believe in. So what do you want to do? I asked. I want to come home. I want to fix this. Can it be fixed? I don't know, but I want to try. What about Stephen? What about him? Is it over? It was over before it started. I just didn't realize it until he started talking about forever. I drove home that afternoon, taking my time and thinking about what came next. Delilah was ready to end the affair, but that didn't mean she was ready to face the consequences of having started it. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Hi," she said when I walked in. "Hi. How was the drive?" "Educational. I had a lot of time to think." "About what?" "About us. About what happens now." She looked up at me with eyes that were red from crying. "What do you want to happen?" "I want you to be honest with me." "I am being honest." "No, you're being selective. You're telling me the parts that make you look like a victim of circumstance instead of someone who made choices." Her expression hardened slightly. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me why you started this affair." "I told you. I got caught up in..." "In what? Nostalgia? The excitement of being pursued? The thrill of doing something forbidden? All of that? And what? And you were bored with me, with us, with the life we built together." She was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," she said finally. "Thank you." "For what?" "For finally being honest." I sat down across from her and looked at the woman I'd been married to for 15 years. She was still beautiful, still the person I'd fallen in love with, but she was also a stranger who'd been lying to me for weeks. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we figure out if there's anything left to save." "Is there?" "I don't know. You broke something, Delilah. I'm not sure it can be fixed." "But you're willing to try?" "I'm willing to see what's possible." This was true, but not in the way she was hearing it. I was willing to see what was possible, but I wasn't willing to pretend that trust could be rebuilt on demand or that forgiveness was the same as forgetting. "What about Stephen?" I asked. "What about him? Is he going to be a problem?" "I don't think so. I told him it was over." "And he accepted that?" "He didn't have much choice." That evening, I found out exactly how much choice Stephen thought he had. At 7 p.m., our doorbell rang. I answered it to find Stephen Vance standing on my front porch, looking like a man who'd been drinking and making poor decisions. "I need to talk to Delilah," he said. "She doesn't want to talk to you." "That's not your decision to make." "Actually, it is. This is my house." He tried to push past me, and I put my hand on his chest. He was softer than I'd expected, the kind of soft that came from years of sitting behind desks instead of doing physical work. "Move," he said. "No. She loves me. She told you it was over. She's scared. She's making decisions based on fear instead of following her heart. Maybe her heart led her into enough trouble already. You don't understand what we have." "I understand that you're drunk and standing on my property uninvited." Delilah appeared behind me. "Stephen, you need to leave." "Del, please, just give me 5 minutes." "I gave you 5 weeks. It was a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake. It was the most real thing that's happened to either of us in years. It was a fantasy. It was love. It was nostalgia." Stephen looked past her to me. "This is your fault. You made her afraid to take risks." "I made her afraid to take risks?" I laughed. "She's been taking risks for weeks. She's just finally calculating the costs." "What costs?" "Her marriage, her family, her reputation, her financial security. I can provide for her." "With what? Your failing business, your broken engagement, your delusions about recreating college?" His face flushed red. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know your company's 3 months from bankruptcy. I know your fiancé left you. I know you're standing on my porch begging my wife to throw away 15 years for a man who can't even keep his own life together." "Delilah," Stephen said, ignoring me. "Tell him what we talked about. Tell him how you feel when you're with me. Stephen, please just go. Tell him about the bond we have, about how some connections can't be broken. I felt something shift inside me, like a gear clicking into place. You're right about bonds, I said. Some are stronger than others. But the strongest bonds aren't the ones from your past. They're the ones that survive pressure. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've been testing the wrong bond. You thought you were testing her loyalty to me, but what you really tested was her willingness to bet her future on someone who crumbles under pressure. Stephen stared at me for a moment, then looked back at Delilah. Is that what this is? You're choosing security over love? I'm choosing reality over fantasy, she said. This isn't over. Yes, it is. After he left, Delilah and I stood in our hallway looking at each other. I'm sorry, she said. For which part? All of it. Are you sorry it happened, or sorry it didn't work out the way you hoped? She flinched. That's not fair. Fair stopped being relevant when you started lying to me. So what happens now? Now we see if we can rebuild something from what's left. But I already knew what was left. Trust was broken, respect was damaged, and the comfortable assumptions that had held our marriage together were gone. Some bonds, once broken, couldn't be repaired. They could only be replaced with something completely different or abandoned entirely. Friday morning, I made a decision that would have surprised everyone who thought they knew me. I called Tom Bradley and told him to file the divorce papers. I thought you were going to try to work things out, he said. I changed my mind. What happened? I realized that some things can't be fixed. They can only be ended cleanly. Are you sure about this? I'm sure that I deserve better than being someone's safe choice after their exciting choice didn't work out. When do you want to serve the papers? Today. I want this finished. That afternoon, while Delilah was at work, a process server delivered the divorce papers to her office. She called me an hour later. Isaac, what is this? It's exactly what it looks like. But we agreed to try to work things out. You agreed to settle for me after Stephen turned out to be a disappointment. That's not the same thing. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. You wanted excitement, you found it, and when it turned out to be more complicated than you expected, you decided boring old Isaac was a safer bet. I made a mistake. Yes, you did. And now we're both going to live with the consequences. Isaac, please, we can fix this. No, we can't. Because you'll always wonder what would have happened if Stephen had been more stable. And I'll always know that you only came back to me because your first choice didn't work out. That's not true. It's true enough. That evening, I packed my things and moved into an extended stay hotel. Not the surveillance hotel I'd been using for weeks, but a nicer place closer to my actual job. Delilah called me every day for a week, alternating between anger and pleading. You're being vindictive, she said during one call. I'm being realistic. You're punishing me for being honest about my feelings. I'm protecting myself from being your backup plan. You were never my backup plan. Then why did you only choose me after Stephen proved he wasn't a viable option? She couldn't answer that question because we both knew the answer. 2 weeks later, Meredith Cole called me. How are you holding up? She asked. Better than expected. How's Stephen? Broke, unemployed, and living with his parents in Brookline. His company folded last week. And Delilah? I haven't heard from her, but I assume she's realizing that her timing could have been better. Probably. Any regrets? About the divorce? No, about the marriage. Some. Such as? I should have paid attention to what she needed instead of assuming that being reliable was enough. And she should have talked to you instead of having an affair. True, but I can only control my own mistakes. That's very mature of you. Maturity is what you get when you stop believing that other people's choices are about you. 3 months later, the divorce was final. Delilah kept the house but had to buy out my equity. I kept my business and my retirement accounts. We shared custody of the kids, who adjusted to the new arrangement with the resilience that teenagers show when the adults in their lives stop pretending everything is fine. I never saw Stephen again, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to California to start fresh. Apparently, he'd decided that Boston held too many painful memories. Delilah and I developed a cordial co-parenting relationship based on mutual respect for our children's needs and mutual acknowledgement that we'd both made choices that couldn't be undone. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into her at Ben's soccer game. You look good, she said. Thanks, so do you. Are you seeing anyone? Not yet. You? No, I'm taking some time to figure out what I actually want instead of what I think I should want. That's probably wise. Isaac? Yeah? Do you think we could have made it work if we'd handled things differently? I thought about it for a moment. Maybe, but we would have had to become different people first. Do you think we're different people now? I think we're more honest about who we actually are. Is that better or worse? It's more real, she nodded. I'm sorry for all of it. I know. Me too. For what? For not paying attention until it was too late to matter. We stood there for a moment, watching our son play soccer and thinking about the choices that had brought us to this place. He was my first, she said quietly. That bond never breaks. No, I agreed. But some bonds are stronger than others, and the strongest ones are the ones you choose to honor even when it's difficult. I chose wrong. We both chose wrong, but we can choose better next time. Will there be a next time? For us, I mean. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman I'd fallen in love with 17 years ago. She was still there, underneath the mistakes and the regrets and the painful lessons we'd both learned. But I also saw the woman who'd lied to me for weeks, who'd chosen excitement over honesty, who'd only come back to me when her first choice proved disappointing. No, I said finally. There won't be a next time for us. Because you can't forgive me? Because forgiveness isn't the same as trust, and trust isn't the same as compatibility. She nodded, looking sad but not surprised. But we can be good co-parents, I continued, and maybe eventually we can be friends. I'd like that. So would I. The game ended with Ben's team winning 3-2. He ran over to us, sweaty and grinning, and for a moment we looked like what we'd never quite managed to be. A family that understood the difference between love and compatibility, between history and future, between the bonds that hold you back and the ones that set you free. Some bonds never break, but the strongest ones are the ones you choose to honor, not the ones that choose you. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let someone go so they can figure out what they actually want, instead of what they think they should want. That's what I learned from watching my marriage end. That's what I learned from watching Delilah choose between her past and her future. And that's what I learned about myself, that being reliable isn't the same as being valued, that being safe isn't the same as being chosen, and that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is walk away from someone you love because you both deserve better than settling for what's comfortable. The bond between Delilah and Stephen never broke, but it shattered under the weight of reality, and in the end, that made all the difference.